My name is Jay Dobbins. I'm a retired undercover federal agent, and I infiltrated the Hells Angels. This is how crime works.
What do you know about the Hells Angels? The peaceful angelic nature they boast about, or the gory hellish nature they truly have?
The ice cream man has landed.
Behind their claims of tranquility lies a dark and unsettling truth of serious criminal and murder cases.
Now I'll see you all in hell, too, remember that.
Come with us as we embark on a journey into the underbelly of the Hell Angels, exploring the criminal acts and the truth behind their facade. Caius Veiovis. In a shocking case that has captivated the nation, Caius Veiovis, a self-proclaimed vampire and Satanist, has been found guilty of kidnapping, murdering, and dismembering 3 men in Pittsfield, Massachusetts. The trial, which lasted for several weeks, ended with a jury delivering a verdict of guilty after 37 hours of deliberation. Veiovis, known for his distinctive appearance featuring forehead implants resembling horns and tattoos depicting green bones and the number 666, shouted defiantly as the jurors left the courtroom, proclaiming, "I'll see you all in hell." Well, that's one place nobody wants to go. Let's take a step back and look deeply into this murder case, shall we? In 2011, the dismembered bodies of David Glasser, Edward Frampton, and Robert Chadwell were discovered buried outside of Pittsfield, 10 days after they were reported missing. The prosecution argued that Veiovis, along with 2 other men, Adam Lee Hall and David Shalhoub, kidnapped and fatally shot the victims. Glasser was set to testify against Hall, a member of the Hells Angels, in an assault case. The prosecution contended that the other 2 men were killed to eliminate witnesses to Glasser's murder. Throughout the trial, Veiovis maintained his innocence, claiming that he had been in isolation for 3 years and had refused to cooperate with the police or accept any plea deals. He alleged that the district attorney acknowledged his lack of involvement in the killings, but sought information about the disposal of the bodies. Veiovis claimed that he was offered a plea deal of conspiracy after the fact with a 7-year sentence but rejected it, stating that he would rather spend the rest of his life in prison than compromise his integrity. After long contemplation and enough evidence, the jury found Veiovis guilty of first-degree murder, kidnapping, and intimidating witnesses. As a result, he was sentenced to 3 consecutive life terms in prison without the possibility of parole. The sentencing marked the end of a high-profile trial that had deeply shaken the community of Pittsfield. To ensure a fair trial, the proceedings were moved to Hampton County Superior Court in Springfield, Massachusetts, located 50 miles away. Before the triple murder case, Veiovis had already gained notoriety for his involvement in previous criminal activities. In 1999, he and his then-girlfriend were accused of assaulting a 16-year-old girl, during which Veiovis identified himself as a Satan worshiper and a vampire. The couple lured the girl into their motel room, where she was cut on the back with a razor blade, and they proceeded to lick her blood while kissing each other. Veiovis and his girlfriend were convicted of elevated aggravated assault and reckless conduct. After serving time for the assault, Veiovis faced further legal troubles. In 2006, he was charged with kidnapping and drug possession after allegedly holding 2 strippers against their will in a hotel room. The kidnapping charges were dropped, but Veiovis was imprisoned in Maine for violating his probation. Well, the case of Caius Veiovis, the self-proclaimed vampire and Satanist convicted of triple murder, has left a lasting impact on the community of Pittsfield, Massachusetts. With his distinctive appearance and history of criminal activities, Veiovis captured media attention long before his recent trial. The guilty verdict and subsequent life sentence without parole have brought some closure to the families of the victims and the community affected by these heinous crimes. As Veiovis vows to appeal the decision, the case serves as a reminder of the dark and disturbing depths to which some individuals can descend. Jonathan Nelson. In the realm of criminal organizations, few names evoke a mix of curiosity and dread like the Hells Angels Motorcycle Club. Within their ranks, one figure stands out from the others, the Sonoma chapter's leader, Jonathan John Nelson. Accused of involvement in a murder plot that sent shockwaves through the community, Nelson's case sheds light on the dark underbelly of this notorious biker gang. Who is Jonathan Nelson? and what secrets lie behind the accusations. Let's delve into the criminal web spun by Nelson and his fellow Hells Angels, raising questions about loyalty, power, and the pursuit of justice. At the heart of the federal complaint lies a chilling accusation: the orchestration of a murder within the Hells Angels ranks. Joel Silva, a fellow club member who had fallen out of favor due to an alleged drug problem, met a gruesome fate in 2014. Federal prosecutors allege that Nelson, along with other club members, signed off on and arranged Silva's murder, carried out at the Fresno clubhouse. But why did Silva's fate take such a dark turn, and what motivated Nelson to play a role in this macabre plot? Well, you might want to take a wild guess. What would make man murder another? Power, money, or a woman? Well, it's actually because of a woman. You see, the Hask had a rule where they couldn't date another member's partners, but Silva had an affair with Folks's then common-law wife, which was a big violation of Hask rules. During the expulsion, among other acts of violence, Folks beat the victim with a baseball bat, forcibly tattooed the victim's forehead, and induced Nelson to pistol whip the victim in the face. As the investigation unfolded, a disturbing detail emerged. Joel Silva's body was never found. Federal prosecutors paint a haunting picture of Silva being shot in the head by Brian Wendt, the president of the Fresno chapter, over a grievance involving a death threat against another chapter president. The absence of Silva's remains raises what happened to his body? Was it secretly disposed of to erase all traces of the crime? Well, after being shot in the head, the next morning Silva's body was incinerated at a local crematory and his truck set on fire. Nelson's defense attorneys argue that he is not the hardened criminal portrayed by the prosecution, but a respected member of the Sonoma community, a father, son, coach, and small business owner. Tim Nelson's legal journey takes a twist as U.S. Magistrate Judge Virginia DeMarchi approves his release on $1 million bond. Yet the U.S. Attorney's Office appeals the decision, leaving Nelson in Santa Rita Jail. Should individuals accused of heinous crimes be released on bail? What factors influence judges' decisions in such cases? So far, you should have questions like this running through your mind. Jonathan Nelson's case is not an isolated incident, but part of a larger narrative surrounding the Hells Angels Motorcycle Club. RICO prosecutions, aimed at dismantling organized crime, have historically faced resistance from the motorcycle club. The story of Jonathan John Nelson offers a glimpse into the shadowy world of the Hells Angels Motorcycle Club. As accusations of murder and criminal activities swirl, the case raises more questions than answers. Is Nelson a respected community member driven to dark deeds, or a criminal mastermind adept at manipulating the justice system? Can justice be served when bodies are hidden and evidence is scarce? As the legal battle continues, the truth behind Jonathan Nelson's alleged involvement in the murder plot remains shrouded in mystery, leaving us to grapple with the complexity of human nature and the pursuit of justice. Zane Peoria Wallace. If the devil had a face, he would definitely look like Zane Peoria Wallace. Does this seem too inhuman to say? Well, you might have a change of heart after hearing the gruesome things he did. Zane Peoria Wallace, a prospect of the Hells Angels motorcycle gang, had just murdered Jasmine Wilson. This incident resulted in a brawl nearly breaking out between members of Wallace's and Wilson's families. The case, which involved a prolonged and vicious assault, had deeply impacted both families, leading to emotional testimonies during the hearing. Wallace was ultimately sentenced to life imprisonment, with a minimum non-parole period of 15 years and 6 months. Jasmine Wilson was a 30-year-old mother of 2, tragically lost her life on August 2, 2019, after suffering a severe assault. Her unconscious and badly injured body was dumped at Wanganui Hospital's emergency department several days prior to her death. Wallace, the perpetrator, was a Hells Angels gang prospect at the time. His father, Stephen, discovered Wilson's battered and bruised body when his son called for help on July 31st. Wallace pleaded guilty to the murder charge on the scheduled day of his retrial in the High Court at Wanganui. Prior to that, he had also pleaded guilty to several other charges, such as threatening grievous bodily harm, assault with intent to injure, threatening to kill, and more. The guilty pleas eliminated the need for a jury trial. During the sentencing hearing, the victim's mother, Brenda O'Shea, delivered a powerful victim impact statement. She expressed her deep anger and the constant feeling of guilt for being alive while her daughter was not. O'Shea emphasized the fractured relationships within the family and the lack of time for mourning and grieving together due to the looming murder trial. Jasmine Wilson's husband, Robert, recalled the heartbreaking moment he had to inform their boys about their mother's condition, facing the possibility of her death or significant impairment. The sisters of the victim, Georgia, Kate, and Zara, spoke about the trauma they experienced and the pain of losing their sister. They expressed their anger towards the perpetrator and emphasized the importance of condemning violence against women. The presiding judge, Justice Francis Cook, recognized the severity of Wallace's actions and the sustained period of terror he had inflicted on Jasmine Wilson. The judge detailed the explicit threats Wallace made, including graphic descriptions of how he intended to harm and kill her. Considering the extreme violence and threats, the Crown prosecutor sought a minimum non-parole period of 16 to 17 years. Ultimately, Justice Cook sentenced Wallace to life imprisonment, with a minimum non-parole period of 15 years and 6 months. Tensions reached a breaking point between members of the two families in the courtroom following the sentencing. Insults were exchanged, and physical altercations were narrowly avoided thanks to the intervention of police and court security. The emotional toll of the case was evident as the courtroom was eventually cleared. The sentencing of Zay Wallace for the murder of Jasmine Wilson was marked by emotional testimonies and a tense confrontation between the families involved. The court proceedings shed light on the devastating impact of the crime on Wilson's family and the need for substantial punishment for the perpetrator. While the sentence imposed by the judge aimed to provide closure to the victim's family, it served as a reminder of the profound loss and grief they continue to endure. Adam Lee Hall. Adam Lee Hall gained infamy as a central figure in a high-profile murder case that shook Berkshire County, Massachusetts. His involvement in the brutal kidnapping, torture, and murder of 3 individuals led to a trial that captured the attention of the public. Born on May 29, 1970, Adam Lee Hall had a troubled past and a history of criminal activities. He was associated with the Aryan Brotherhood, a notorious criminal motorcycle gang known for its involvement in drugs, violence, and white supremacist ideology. Hall's criminal record included convictions for drugs, assault, and firearms offenses, which painted a picture of a dangerous and volatile individual. In 2011, Adam Lee Hall became the central figure in a shocking murder case that shook the community of Berkshire County. Hall, along with 2 accomplices, David Chalou and Caius Veiovis, was accused of kidnapping, torturing, and killing 3 individuals: David Glasser, Edward Frampton, and Robert Chadwell. The motive behind the murders was reportedly rooted in a dispute between Hall and David Glasser over a stolen motorcycle. It was alleged that the victims were abducted from their respective residences, taken to a remote location, and subjected to a horrific ordeal before being executed. Following an extensive investigation, law enforcement apprehended Adam Lee Hall in August 2011, shortly after the discovery of the victims' bodies. The subsequent trial garnered significant media attention as prosecutors presented a damning case against Hall, relying on witness testimonies, forensic evidence, and circumstantial links to establish his guilt. In February 2014, after a lengthy trial, Adam Lee Hall was found guilty on multiple charges, including 3 counts of first-degree murder, kidnapping, and witness intimidation. The jury, recognizing the heinous nature of the crimes, recommended a sentence of life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. In the aftermath of his conviction, Adam Lee Hall pursued several appeals in an attempt to challenge his guilty verdict and sentence. However, his appeals were ultimately unsuccessful, and his conviction was upheld. The legal system affirmed the gravity of his crimes and the need for justice to be served. Adam Lee Hall remains incarcerated in a Massachusetts correctional facility, serving his life sentence for the brutal murders he orchestrated. The Berkshire County case stands as a stark reminder of the devastating impact that violent crimes can have on communities and the imperative of holding individuals accountable for their actions. While Adam Lee Hall's appeals were unsuccessful, His life sentence stands as a testament to the severity of his actions and the importance of upholding the principles of justice and accountability in society. The Berkshire County case remains etched in the annals of criminal history, serving as a reminder of the devastating consequences of violence and the ongoing efforts to ensure public safety and the pursuit of justice. Carl Garside. Carl Garside, a 48-year-old member of the rival outlaws motorcycle gang, finds himself in a perilous situation after turning his back on his comrades who were involved in the murder of a Hells Angels member. Following his decision to distance himself from the gang, Garside has become a target, with a price on his head. In 2007, Carl Garside played a role in the fatal shooting of Jerry Tobin, a 35-year-old Hells Angels member, on the 40 motorway. Garside was one of 7 individuals involved in the incident, which unfolded when 3 members of the South Warwickshire Outlaws chapter, Garside's brother Dane Garside, Simon Turner, and Sean Creighton, pulled alongside Tobin's car at a speed of 90 mph. Tobin was shot once in the head and tragically lost his life. In a surprising turn of events, Carl Garside made the decision to sever ties with the Outlaws gang, expressing his desire to disassociate himself from their criminal activities. This act of betrayal against the secretive and tightly knit gang has serious repercussions, as the Outlaws strictly adhere to a code of honor. Garside's departure from the gang has been met with anger and hostility from his former comrades. Since his separation from the Outlaws, Carl Garside has been living under constant threat and fear for his life. Death threats prompted authorities to transfer him to a different correctional facility for his safety. Garside's actions have been viewed as a violation of the gang's code of honor, and he is now considered a marked man by the Outlaws. The risks he faces as a result of his decision to break away from the gang are substantial and pose a significant danger to his well-being. During the trial in 2008, Sean Creighton admitted to firing the fatal shot that killed Jerry Tobin. Carl Garside, along with Malcolm Bull, Dean Taylor, and Ian Cameron, served as backup killers, waiting in cars during the murder. All 7 individuals involved were convicted of murder at Birmingham Crown Court and received life sentences. Garside's involvement in the crime and subsequent separation from the gang have brought additional attention to the case. This case serves as a grim reminder of the risks and ramifications associated with organized crime and the challenges faced by individuals who choose to break away from these criminal networks. Now, it's time for today's subscriber pick. In the courtroom, a Hells Angel gang member looks very angry and upset about the sentence he received. This picture shows him with a red, demon-like face, as if he is filled with rage. He is wearing a prison orange jumpsuit, which is typical for prisoners. His eyes are intense and seem to be on fire, and if we look more closely, there might be smoke coming from his face, showing how angry he is. The gang member is standing with his fists clenched and his body tense, showing that he is resisting and not accepting the court's decision. This picture captures the strong emotions he is feeling, which is anger, frustration, and a sense of unfairness. It reminds us of the difficult and complicated world of criminals, where their actions have consequences, and they have to face the consequences in court. Tell us what you think about this picture in the comments section. Emery Martin. Emery Martin, a longtime member of the notorious Hells Angels motorcycle gang, was sentenced to 7.5 years in prison after pleading guilty to cocaine trafficking and acting in the benefit of a criminal organization. The 61-year-old from St. Anne de Madawaska was identified by the Royal Canadian Mounted Police as a key figure involved in drug trafficking activities between Quebec and New Brunswick. Emery Martin appeared via video conference in Bathurst Provincial Court as he was showing potential symptoms of COVID-19. He pleaded guilty to cocaine trafficking and acting in the benefit of a criminal organization. The Crown and defense had initially sought an 8-year prison sentence, but Judge Denise LeBlanc reduced the sentence to 7.5 years due to Martin's 1,209 days already spent in prison since his arrest in 2018. The judge also considered the adverse conditions Martin endured during his pre-trial detention, including long periods of solitary confinement and the loss of his right to privacy. The Royal Canadian Mounted Police has identified Emery Martin as a long-standing member of the Hells Angels, an outlaw motorcycle gang notorious for its involvement in drug trafficking. The organization has been known to transport drugs from Quebec into New Brunswick. Martin's close ties to the Hells Angels led the Royal Canadian Mounted Police to believe that he played a primary role in importing drugs into the northwestern part of the province. It is estimated that Martin imported at least 96 kilograms of cocaine between the summers of 2016 and 2017. Martin's arrest was part of Operation J Thunder, an Royal Canadian Mounted Police investigation targeting cocaine sales in the Acadian Peninsula and the northern New Brunswick counties of Restigouche, Madawaska, and Victoria. In total, 14 individuals were arrested in connection with the operation, which aimed to disrupt drug trafficking activities in the region. It is noteworthy that none of the other individuals charged in the operation are members of the Hells Angels, according to the police. Judge LeBlanc took into account Martin's time spent in prison prior to the trial and credited him 1.5 days for each day served. As a result, approximately 5 years were deducted from his upcoming imprisonment. The reduction aimed to acknowledge the time Martin had already spent in custody and to ensure a fair sentencing process. Martin's case sheds light on the ongoing efforts to combat organized crime and drug trafficking, emphasizing the commitment of law enforcement agencies to disrupt the operations of groups such as the Hells Angels. Maurice Boucher. Maurice Boucher is a notorious figure in Canadian criminal history, particularly in relation to his involvement with the Hells Angels motorcycle gang. Born on June 21, 1953, in Kazapskal, Quebec, Boucher rose to prominence as a high-ranking member and leader of the Hells Angels Montreal chapter, known as the Nomads. Boucher's criminal activities became widely known during the 1990s, a period marked by violent conflicts between the Hells Angels and rival criminal organizations, particularly the Rock Machine biker gang. These conflicts, known as the Quebec Biker War, resulted in numerous bombings, shootings, and assassinations. Boucher, known for his charismatic leadership and ruthless tactics, played a central role in orchestrating the violence. In 1997, Boucher gained notoriety with the assassination of 2 prison guards, Diane Levine and Pierre Rondeau, in an attempt to pressure the government to improve the conditions of incarcerated Hells Angels members. The killings led to a massive police crackdown on the Hells Angels and their associates, with Operation Springboard targeting Boucher and his criminal network. In 2002, Boucher was arrested and charged with various offenses, including murder, conspiracy, and drug trafficking. He stood trial for his involvement in the deaths of the 2 prison guards and was found guilty that same year. Subsequently, Boucher received a life sentence with no possibility of parole for 25 years. While incarcerated, Boucher's influence within the Hells Angels diminished, and he was eventually expelled from the gang in 2002. Despite his imprisonment, Boucher's legacy as a prominent figure in the criminal underworld and his impact on the biker gang landscape in Quebec remain significant. Since his incarceration, Boucher has been implicated in additional criminal activities, including allegedly ordering the murders of fellow inmates and plotting to kill a former Hells Angels member turned informant. These allegations further solidified his reputation as a dangerous and influential figure within organized crime. Maurice Boucher's story serves as a reminder of the challenges faced by law enforcement agencies in combating organized crime and the enduring influence of criminal networks such as the Hells Angels. His actions and the Quebec Biker War left a lasting mark on Canada's criminal history, prompting efforts to dismantle and disrupt criminal organizations involved in drug trafficking and other illegal activities. Neil Cantrell, Stephen Cantrell, and Robert Lowry. Neil and Stephen Cantrell were charged to court for aggravated assault, kidnapping, extortion, and choking in a drug-related case. The crimes, which took place in Chilliwack on August 2016, were motivated by an alleged drug debt. The events leading to the convictions unfolded when Neil Cantrell invited Richard Houle to meet him at a highway pullout. Accompanied by Stephen Cantrell and another man identified as Robert Lowry, Neil Cantrell confronted Houle, accusing him of ripping him off. The encounter quickly turned violent, with Neil Cantrell grabbing Houle by the throat and the third man striking him on the right side of his face. The blow caused Houle to bleed profusely and knocked off his glasses. Subsequently, the third man applied a chokehold to Hool, leaving him nearly unconscious. The assault didn't end there. Hool was then forced into the rear seat of an SUV, which drove off with all three assailants on board. During the drive, Hool suffered further assaults and was threatened with harm if he didn't transfer the title of his house to his attackers as repayment for the alleged drug debt. Fortunately, a witness who had observed the initial assault called the police, alerting them to the situation. During the trial, Richard Howell positively identified Neil Cantrell as one of the attackers. While he had prior knowledge of Neil Cantrell, he hadn't met Stephen Cantrell or Robert Lowry until just before the offenses. Hool testified that Neil Cantrell introduced Stephen as his son, but couldn't recall the name of the third assailant. Robert Lowry's appeal primarily focused on the issue of identity. He argued that the trial judge erred by relying on the presence of the victim's blood on his jeans as evidence of his involvement in the assault. Lowry suggested that the blood could have been contaminated from other sources where Hool's blood was present. However, the court rejected this argument, noting that the jeans were properly bagged to prevent contamination. The trial judge emphasized that there was no evidence of blood contamination on the jeans seized from Lowry. The presence of Hool's blood on the appellant's jeans was considered powerful evidence establishing Lowry's identity as the third assailant. This finding, along with Hool's identification testimony, solidified Lowry's connection to the assault. The British Columbia Court of Appeal unanimously upheld the convictions for Robert Lowry, Neil Cantrell, and Stephen Cantrell. The court found that the trial judge had properly assessed the evidence and made factual determinations concerning Lowry's identity as one of the assailants. The presence of the victim's blood on his jeans, along with Hool's identification, was considered compelling evidence. The court dismissed Lowry's argument of blood contamination, stating that there was no credible basis for such a claim. The proper handling and analysis of the jeans by law enforcement professionals ensured that the evidence remained untainted. The court's ruling emphasizes the importance of victim identification and the weight attributed to physical evidence, such as the presence of the victim's blood on the appellant's jeans. By upholding the trial judge's findings, the court acknowledges the careful consideration of the evidence and the significance of establishing the identity of the perpetrators. This case serves as a reminder of the justice system's commitment to holding individuals accountable for their criminal actions. Thank you for watching this video. See you in the next one.